Hey guys, I got another experimental build to show, and by experimental I mean it's not meant to be suggested or recommended, but I wanted to explore the possibility of using Crown of Ice and scaling spell damage and attack damage at the same time, and using both attacks and spells. As always, in video description you'll find timestamps and other info. So basically the idea of this build was to use Crown of Ice, and Crown of Ice makes your spell damage affect your attack damage, then use Bloodseeker for instant life leech from the attacks, and then try to get damage in all sorts of ways. In order to make it less clunky I needed a channeling attack skill, and there are only two of them, Charge Dash and Blade Flurry. And Charge Dash in Bestiary is not good, so the other option was Blade Flurry. And Blade Flurry with cast while channeling and Blade Fall scales basically the same way, both are physical damage, well if your weapon is physical, and both scale with the stat stick. And you can use the stat stick because in your main hand you can use a claw or a sword or a dagger, and in the offhand you can use a scepter or an axe or a mace, and basically you only attack with your main hand with Blade Flurry. And a stat stick like this basically gives you a lot of damage if you have a lot of physical damage. And this applies both to attacks and to spells. And in main hand I decided to go with Bloodseeker to have instant life leech from the attacks, which also has pretty decent DPS and is physical, so the stat stick affects both Blade Flurry and Blade Fall, since Blade Fall is a physical spell. And I decided to go with a Chieftain. Actually this is very similar build to the Scorching Ray cast while channeling Blade Vortex build, but in that build I used full conversion from physical into fire. While in this I only convert 50% and I'm not using Avatar of Fire, because I do need to do physical damage to be able to reach mana, and mana is kind of an issue. And also I didn't want full conversion because I was hoping to get a stat stick with more than just one extra damage modes, like extra fire damage, then extra maybe lighting, extra cold, or extra random elements like on this one. By the way, extra random element is not counted in the tooltip DPS, and even in path of building it's not counted. But I have entered and specially edited it in the path of building so you can turn it on and just see the extra damage as a lighting damage, instead of just random. Now, what I was able to do with this build is, well, I did try Shaper, but I only tried it once and I failed. But I did manage to kill Shaper's Guidance. It wasn't fast, and basically combined overall DPS is only about 300,000 Shaper DPS, but that is with all the buffs. And I am using 6 Link and level 21 Bladefall. So my damage is basically maxed out. You may be able to get more damage if you went for crits, but I thought that I would not be able to have enough crit chance, and it may be more expensive because you would need to get crit chance, you would need to get crit multiplier, you would need to get crit chance for spells. But I guess you would be able to drop some spell damage nodes, but then again, why even use Crown of Ice? Crown of Ice in the past used to be very strong because more spell damage multipliers would also affect it, and it would also give damage to attacks, but it was changed to be affected only by increased and a reduction to spell damage. So in the end, like I said, this is sort of experimental, and I would not recommend anyone to play this, but if you kind of want to make some sort of hybrid attack spell build, you can still do it. It's not the best one. Or maybe try adapt it and change a couple of things, maybe use some other spells. By the way, Charge Dash in the Incursion League will be slightly changed, so maybe Charge Dash could be used with this somehow. Or maybe even use different Ascendancy instead of Chieftain, maybe Assassin for crits. Maybe even Inquisitor, which does scale well with crits, or just elemental damage, or with well, attacks and spells at the same time. I guess even Elementalist could work. There are many options and I obviously can't test them all. So let me just go over my items first. Bloodseeker Claw for instant life leech from attacks, but only attacks. Then a stat stick, a 6 Link Loreweave, Crown of Ice obviously, Fenumus Weave, which probably will not be available in the Incursion League, but you could probably use Thumb Fist, like a 2-sucker Thumb Fist. Then, well, decent boots, decent belt. The amulet is also pretty decent, gain 20% of physical damage as extra fire is pretty big. And then I am using the Mark of the Shaper and Mark of the Elder, and they are probably not mandatory, but well, since I'm scaling spell damage and my spell damage affects my attack damage, so Mark of the Shaper combined with Mark of the Elder gives a lot of attack damage. In my case, combining these two, I get 133% increased attack damage, and of course spell damage from Mark of the Shaper for my spells. For the flask, I am using Device Oak because I am dealing mostly fire damage, and then Atziri's Promise, which also gives extra chaos damage from physical and extra chaos damage from elemental damage. Now for skills and links. Blade Flurry is linked with Castful Channeling, Bladefall, Concentrated Effect, Added Fire, and Elemental Focus. All of them affects both Blade Flurry and Bladefall damage. Normally you don't use Concentrated Effect in the clear speed setup, but with this it's not that bad really. It does not reduce the range of Blade Flurry reach, and if you reach them, the Bladefall will just do the rest. If not, then Herald of Ash will. And my Herald of Ash is linked with Enlighten level 3, and I also have Anger Aura. And I do need Enlighten level 3 or I won't have enough mana at all. Because like I said, I am using Aspect of the Spider, but if you don't use it, then you probably don't need Enlighten either. Then I manually cast Elemental Weakness, which is linked with Blood Magic, because it does cost quite a lot of mana and I don't really have a lot of mana to spare. I also have Flame Dash linked to the same setup with Blood Magic. Flame Dash is only used to, well, Flame Dash over the cliffs and stuff, because Whirling Blade does not do that. And Whirling Blades are linked with Fortify, Blood Magic, and faster attacks. And I also have Ancestral Protector to increase my attack speed, which is also linked with faster attacks and Culling Strike. And I also use Enduring Cry to maintain my endurance charges against bosses, if I don't forget to use it. Now, Chieftain does give you ability to generate endurance charges if you kill burning enemies, but if you remember, I am using Elemental Focus. However, Herald of Ash also burns the enemies, so it works very well and you don't need to use Enduring Cry. And while mapping you always have maxed endurance charges, which is only free, but if you want you can get more. Now for the passive skill tree. First I took the damage nodes, this which gives Fire Pen and converts half of your physical damage into fire and gives you a very strong buff. Then Hinekora for fire damage leech, which you kind of need. Extra strength and cover enemies in ash, which makes enemies take more fire damage. And then went with this node, whatever it's pronounced, which allows you to generate endurance charges. And then finally from the Uber Lab, I took this, which gives a lot of fire resistance, a bit more regen and a bit more mitigation. And only after doing the Uber Lab I could manage my resistances better and focus mostly on getting enough of cold and lightning resistance, on my gears that is. As for the rest of the passive skill tree, since this is a hybrid attack spellcaster, so you do need accuracy, you do need attack speed, and then you do need some AoE because you are using concentrated effect, and the rest just goes into the spell damage, elemental damage, life, resistances, and then traveling to the shadow area to get global physical damage nodes and more life. I'm not sure if it is worth traveling all the way to the shadow area, but I guess you could build it as a crit build and you would have more reasons to go to the shadow area and probably use different rings and maybe amulet. I really don't know, it's hard to tell if crit build would be better and easier to build. As for the jewels, I did have to get some jewels with 1 or 2 mana gain on hit, more life, some resistances, and then either generic damage increase, fire damage increase, or you have to pick either claw damage, some attack damage, attack speed, or spell damage or flare damage to spells, or flare damage to attacks. And that's about all. This build was strange to play, I guess. It wasn't the best, but sometimes it did feel really strong, but sometimes it did feel squishy and weak. In the end, I do have 218% increased life from the passive skill tree, and I could face tank Minotaur without any dangerous map mods. Hydra was also easy, Phoenix wasn't difficult, the only problem was the Chimera because of the art phase. I could face tank Chimera, but I couldn't do the art phase without dying. Elder was also very annoying. Well, the first phase was kind of easy, but the second phase with the portals is really difficult to protect the Shaper, and if you mess up then all the hell breaks loose and it's really hard to survive. In the end, I think what this build lacks is just damage, sadly. And that's all. I got one more build before the end of the Bestiary. I'm gonna try to build around Vortex and Mark of the Shaper ring to have like double vortexes, but it's mostly gonna be just for fun and not to be taken seriously. Anyway, that's about all. Thank you for watching and see you soon.